spring is a time of renewal, of warmth, and life returning after the cold grip of winter. But what if the changing of the season also brought something sinister? In a quiet town where the flowers bloom brighter than anywhere else, the arrival of spring is not a celebration. It is a warning. Welcome to 13 o'clock, where we unravel the eerie mysteries lurking beneath the beauty of nature. This is the tale of the blooming curse. Every year, the small town of Fairhaven held its beloved spring festival. Tourists flocked from all over to witness the vibrant fields of flowers that seemed to glow unnaturally in the sunlight. The town thrived on these blooms, which were unlike any others in the world. Yet, behind the cheerful decorations and sweet floral scents, a dark secret lay buried beneath the roots. It was said that centuries ago, when settlers first arrived in Fairhaven, they disturbed something ancient in the soil. The ground beneath their feet was not empty, it was hungry. And ever since, each spring, the town paid a price for their transgression. No one spoke about the disappearances, but every spring, on the first full moon after the equinox, someone went missing. There were no signs of struggle, no trails to follow, just an empty room, an unfinished meal, a bed still warm. The only clue? The sudden appearance of a strange new flower blooming near the missing person's home, its petals a deep, unnatural red. Locals whispered that the flowers were more than just plants, that they were harbingers. Some believed they were warnings. Others believed they were graves. This year, it was Lydia Carter who vanished. A schoolteacher in her 30s, she was last seen tending to her garden, pulling weeds and humming to herself. The next morning, her house was empty. Her front yard, however, was covered in crimson blossoms that had not been there the night before. Her friends searched for her, but there was no trace. The sheriff's department wrote it off as a disappearance, same as always. And same as always, the town moved on. The festival continued. The flowers kept growing. What could explain the blooming curse? Some believe the settlers made a pact with something in the land, a desperate plea for prosperity in exchange for life. Every spring, the town flourishes, but only because something is feeding. Another theory suggests that the flowers themselves are sentient, acting as reapers, choosing their next victim and devouring them beneath the soil. Their roots dig deep, intertwining with the bones of the lost. There are even those who claim that the town's own residents are complicit, that they know who will disappear and when. That this is no curse, it is a ritual, a tradition masked as a tragedy. Imagine waking up one morning and finding a single red flower outside your door. The petals are delicate, damp with a morning dew. It shouldn't be there. It wasn't there yesterday, and yet it blooms, swaying ever so slightly in the breeze. What would you do? Would you pluck it? Would you ignore it? Or would you realize in that moment that your fate has already been sealed? The festival comes and goes, and Lydia Carter is forgotten. But one day, her best friend Emily notices something strange. A new flower has appeared in her backyard, just like the ones that grew outside Lydia's home. It is still a bud, closed tightly, as if waiting for something. And then, in the wind, she swears she hears a whisper, a voice calling her name. The blooming curse is not just a legend, it is a cycle. The town flourishes as its people disappear one by one. The flowers keep growing, and the town keeps silent. So the next time you see a flower bloom where it shouldn't, ask yourself, who was taken to make it grow? And more importantly, are you next? The town of Brightwood was known for its spectacular spring season. Lush cherry blossoms lined the streets, wildflowers sprouted in every park, and the air held a sweet, earthy scent that signaled winter's end. Then, one spring, the pollen count hit an all-time high. It started with mild symptoms, sneezing fits, watery eyes. But soon, people began reporting something strange. Shadowy figures lurking at the edge of their vision. Soft whispers drifting through the air. At first, doctors blamed mass hysteria. But then, people began vanishing. Noah Carter, a local journalist, decided to investigate. He interviewed residents who claimed to see things that weren't there. One woman, Mrs. Holloway, swore she saw her dead husband standing in their garden, his body swaying in the breeze as though he were nothing more than a trick of the wind. When she blinked, he was gone. A teenager, Daniel, described being followed by a faceless figure through the park. Every time he turned around, it was closer, reaching for him. The common factor? They had all spent time outdoors, breathing in the heavy pollen-laden air. Noah dismissed the claims as seasonal allergies mixed with overactive imaginations until it happened to him. One evening, Noah took a walk through the woods at the edge of town, his notebook in hand. The pollen was thick, swirling like golden mist in the fading light. His head felt heavy, his vision slightly blurred. Then, a voice, soft, familiar, calling his name. He turned, expecting to see a jogger or a passing hiker. Instead, he saw his sister. But that was impossible. She had died 5 years ago. "Noah," she whispered, stepping toward him. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale as paper. "Come with me." His breath caught in his throat. He stumbled back, his rational mind fighting against what he was seeing. A hallucination. It had to be. But then she reached out, and he felt her fingers brush against his wrist. Ice cold. Real. Noah fled that night, locking himself in his apartment and refusing to go outside. But the visions didn't stop. The town doctor proposed an unsettling theory. What if the pollen wasn't just triggering hallucinations, but lifting the veil between the living and the dead? Pollen is a carrier of life. It spreads, it grows, it fertilizes. But what if, in the right conditions, it carried something else? Something that shouldn't be seen? Some began to believe that the pollen had unlocked a doorway, one that let something through. Imagine walking down your street in broad daylight, the sun shining, birds singing, and then, out of the corner of your eye, you see someone who shouldn't be there. A loved one long gone, a stranger with no face, a shadow that doesn't belong. You tell yourself it's the pollen, that your mind is playing tricks on you. But then you hear your name, and you feel something cold brush against your skin. Noah left Brightwood shortly after, unable to shake the feeling that he had been followed. Years later, in another city, on another spring morning, he woke to find golden pollen dusting his windowsill, and a voice whispering his name from just outside the door. We think of spring as a season of renewal. But what if some things aren't meant to wake up? What if the golden dust swirling in the air isn't just nature's way of spreading life, but a whisper from something beyond it? And remember, some things should stay unseen. Spring cleaning, a time to declutter, refresh, and uncover things long forgotten. Old clothes, lost trinkets, forgotten memories. But sometimes, what's buried should stay buried. For Claire, spring cleaning was an annual ritual, a fresh start. This year, she finally decided to tackle the attic, a space she had avoided since moving into her late grandmother's house. Dust clung to the air, swirling in the dim light, filtering through a single cracked window. Cardboard boxes stacked like gravestones lined the walls, their labels long faded. And then she found it, a small wooden chest, unmarked, locked tight but not with a key, with rusted nails. Claire hesitated. A deep sense of unease settled over her. The chest felt wrong, as though it had been sealed for a reason. But curiosity is a powerful thing. She grabbed a crowbar, pried the nails loose, and lifted the lid. Inside, she found nothing, just an old, moth-eaten cloth covering something solid. She pulled it away and revealed a mirror. Not just any mirror, a blackened, warped piece of glass framed in dark, twisted wood, the kind that seemed to drink in the light. And then, her reflection blinked. Claire stumbled back, heart hammering in her chest. She wasn't imagining it. The reflection stood there, staring at her, even after she moved away. And then it stepped forward, not in the mirror, into the attic. The air grew heavy. The dust stilled, and Claire realized she was no longer alone. The thing that had once been her reflection tilted its head, studying her with eyes that were almost hers, but not quite. It smiled, and in that smile, Claire understood. This thing had been waiting, waiting for someone to break the seal, waiting for someone to set it free. Mirrors have long been seen as portals, gateways to other realms, reflections of things beyond our understanding. But what if a mirror didn't just reflect? What if it absorbed? What if, somewhere along the line, Claire's grandmother had realized what lurked inside? What if she had trapped something within that glass and sealed it away, never meant to be disturbed? And now, it was free. Imagine looking into a mirror and seeing something that wasn't quite you. Imagine watching your reflection linger after you turn away. Imagine knowing that somewhere in your house, something that looks exactly like you is walking around, and it doesn't want to leave. That night, Claire locked the attic door, boarded it up, nailed it shut, but deep in the darkness, she could hear it. Footsteps, not above her, not below her, but somewhere in between. A quiet knock against the mirror, and a voice. Let me back in. Spring cleaning is supposed to be a fresh start, but some things are never meant to be uncovered. Some things are buried for a reason, and some doors should never be opened. The town of Belwick prided itself on its sprawling botanical garden, a sanctuary of rare and exquisite flora. Every spring, tourists arrived to witness the breathtaking bloom, especially the midnight lilies, a flower found nowhere else on Earth. They were said to have appeared suddenly a century ago, growing only within the garden's iron gates. But there was something different about them. People claimed that if you stood among the flowers at dusk, you could hear faint murmurs in the air, whispers, voices calling out. Most dismissed it as the rustling wind or the buzzing of insects, until the disappearances began. It started with a local gardener, Ezra Holt. He had tended to the garden for over 30 years, knew every petal, every root. One evening, as he pruned the midnight lilies, he heard it. A voice. Not just a whisper, but a distinct, chilling voice. They buried the truth. Dig deeper. Ezra froze. The voice was so close, as if someone was standing right behind him. But he was alone. The next morning, his tools lay scattered in the soil, his gloves soaked with morning dew. Ezra was gone. Over the following weeks, more people vanished, each last seen near the garden at twilight. A teenage girl taking photos, a local historian researching old town records, a journalist investigating the disappearances. Their belongings were found near the flowers, but the people themselves were never seen again. Then came the visions. Visitors to the garden reported unsettling experiences, shadowy figures flickering between the trees, whispers growing louder when they strayed too close to the midnight lilies. One woman collapsed near the fountain, trembling, whispering fragments of a name no one had spoken in years. The town's history held dark secrets. Decades ago, Belwick had been home to a powerful family, the Thatchers. Whispers of blackmail, betrayal, and murder surrounded them, but their legacy was erased, buried beneath time. Or so they thought. Researchers discovered that the botanical garden was built directly over an unmarked graveyard. Dozens of bodies had been secretly buried there, their stories forgotten. And now, they were speaking through the roots, through the flowers that fed on the soil, tainted with their bones. Imagine walking through a garden where every vine, every petal, carries the remnants of something long dead. Imagine hearing your own name whispered in the breeze, a soft, urgent plea to listen. But the more you listen, the more you lose yourself. And the moment you understand what they're saying, you never leave. One night, the mayor ordered the midnight lilies removed. Perhaps it was superstition, or perhaps it was fear. But when the gardeners arrived at dawn, they found the flowers had spread. Where there had been a single patch, now they stretched across the entire garden. And in the middle of them all, a single, human-shaped impression in the soil, as if someone had just been buried. Some secrets refused to stay buried. Some voices refused to be silenced. And sometimes, the most beautiful things in nature grow from the darkest roots. So the next time you walk through a garden and hear a whisper, ask yourself, is it just the wind? Or is it something trying to tell you the truth? April 1st, April Fool's Day. A day of harmless pranks, jokes, and laughter. But sometimes a joke goes too far, and sometimes it awakens something that should have stayed forgotten. It started as a tradition among a group of friends in the small town of Black Hollow. Every year, on April 1st, they would dare each other to do something outrageous, breaking into an abandoned house, summoning a spirit, scaring the new kid in town. It was all in good fun. Until last year. Lena, Jacob, Miles, and Sophia had been inseparable since childhood. Their pranks were legendary, and no dare was ever left unchallenged. But as they got older, the pranks had to be bigger, scarier. And that's when Jacob suggested the old mirror ritual. Black Hollow had its own urban legend, the Mirror Man, a figure that, according to town lore, could be summoned by saying his name 3 times into a mirror on April 1st. Unlike Bloody Mary or Candyman, the Mirror Man wasn't just supposed to appear. He was said to offer a deal, a pact, one wish granted, but at a terrible cost. No one took it seriously. It was just another ghost story parents told kids to keep them from wandering into the woods at night. A perfect April Fool's prank. So that night, they gathered in the abandoned Bellevue Manor, an old Victorian house on the outskirts of town. Dust and decay filled the air as they stood before the cracked, floor-length mirror in the parlor. Miles lit a candle. Sophia pulled out her phone to record. Jacob grinned, always the fearless leader. And Lena hesitated. "Maybe we shouldn't," she said. "What if?" Jacob rolled his eyes. "It's just a story, Lena. What's the worst that can happen?" He turned to the mirror and whispered the name. "Mirror Man, Mirror Man, Mirror Man." For a long moment, nothing happened. The candle flickered. Sophia snorted. Miles laughed. The tension broke. Then, the mirror rippled. The reflection twisted, the faces stretching into something wrong. Their eyes darkened, hollow pits of black. Their mouths pulled into impossible grins, as if the mirror itself was swallowing them whole. And then, the candle went out. Panic set in. Lena fumbled for her phone's flashlight. The room was suffocatingly silent. Then came a whisper, soft like breath against glass. "One of you belongs to me now." The mirror shattered, and the lights came back on. Jacob was gone. They searched the entire house, screaming his name, but he had vanished. No footprints, no signs of struggle, just the broken shards of glass on the floor. The police were called. A search party was formed, but no one ever found Jacob. A tragic accident, they said. Maybe he had run away. Maybe he had fallen into some hidden passage in the old house. But Lena knew the truth, and she knew the rules of the Mirror Man's game. One wish, one sacrifice, one April Fool's pact. They had summoned him, and now he was waiting. A year has passed. April 1st is here again. Lena wakes in the middle of the night, heart pounding. In the dim light of her bedroom, she sees it, a faint shimmer in the mirror across the room. A reflection that isn't quite right. A figure standing just behind her, grinning. She doesn't turn around. She knows the rules now. She knows what's coming. The April Fool's pact was never a joke. And this time, it's her turn. Easter morning had always been a day of joy. Hidden eggs, chocolate bunnies, and pastel colors filling the town. But for 6-year-old Oliver, this Easter would be different. This Easter would be remembered for all the wrong reasons. It started in the backyard beneath the old willow tree. His mother had scattered plastic eggs around the grass, some tucked inside flower pots, others nestled in the bushes. But one stood out, a single white egg, larger than the rest, smooth and unnaturally cold. Oliver picked it up, expecting the hollow plastic sound of candy shifting inside. But it was heavy, solid, not like the others. When he shook it, something inside moved. That was the first sign something was wrong. That night, Oliver placed the egg on his nightstand, mesmerized by its strange, ivory surface. In the dim glow of his NIGHDLIGHD, he swore he saw it twitch. He told his mother about it, but she dismissed it as excitement from too much sugar. "Just another Easter egg, sweetheart," she said with a tired smile. But Oliver wasn't so sure. As the house grew silent and the wind rattled the windows, he lay awake, staring at the egg. The longer he looked, the less it seemed like an egg. The surface pulsed, almost like breathing. A faint scratching sound echoed from within. Then a crack. By morning, the egg had split open. Inside, nestled in dark, wet fragments of shell, was something that didn't belong in any Easter hunt. At first, Oliver thought it was a bird, a baby chick maybe, but as it unfolded its spindly limbs, revealing long, thin fingers tipped with blackened claws, his breath caught in his throat. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes, too many eyes, were clouded, shifting as though they could see through him. The creature shuddered, adjusting to the light, then turned its small, writhing head toward Oliver. It smiled. The next few nights were different. Oliver's mother noticed he wasn't eating as much. He stopped playing with his toys, stopped asking for bedtime stories. He spent more time in his room, whispering. At first, she thought it was an imaginary friend. But imaginary friends don't leave wet footprints on the floor. They don't stare from the closet when the door is slightly ajar. And they certainly don't hum lullabies in a voice too deep for a child. A week passed before Oliver's mother decided to check on him in the middle of the night. His room was dark, save for the sliver of moonlight filtering through the curtains. She stepped inside, heart pounding, eyes adjusting to the shadows. Oliver was sitting up in bed, eyes wide, unmoving. At the foot of his bed stood the creature. It had grown, its arms longer, fingers twitching with anticipation, its smile wider, revealing too many teeth. Oliver's mother gasped, but before she could scream, the thing turned its head toward her. And in Oliver's small, innocent voice, it whispered, "You shouldn't have found the egg." By morning, the bed was empty. No signs of struggle, no footprints, no broken windows. Just silence. The only thing left behind was the eggshell, now fully intact, as if it had never been broken. The hunt was over, and something else was waiting to hatch. Rain has a way of washing the world clean. It blurs the edges of reality, distorts lights into watery halos, and fills the night with a rhythmic, ceaseless whisper. But in one small town, the rain brings something else. Something that should not be there. The first time Hannah saw the man in the raincoat, she was 6 years old. A storm had rolled in that evening, the kind that rattled windows and made the lights flicker. Her parents were asleep, unaware that their daughter stood at her bedroom window, watching the rain sheet down in silver lines. And standing on the sidewalk, perfectly still despite the downpour, was a man. His coat was long, dark, and glistening with water. A wide-brimmed hat obscured his face. He did not move, did not flinch as thunder cracked overhead. He simply stood there, looking up at her window. Hannah's breath hitched. She wanted to call for her parents, but when she blinked, he was gone. For years, she convinced herself it was a dream, a shadow cast strangely by the streetlights, a child's overactive imagination. Until the next spring. It was always in the spring, always after the first heavy rain. She saw him again when she was 12, then 16, then 20. Each time, he stood in the same place, unmoving, watching. She tried to tell herself it was a coincidence, some drifter, a trick of the mind. But deep down, she knew better, because each time she saw him, someone in town went missing. It was subtle at first. A homeless man vanished from behind the gas station. A woman on a late-night jog never returned home. People whispered, but there were no leads, no evidence, no suspects, just the rain and the silent, waiting figure beneath it. By the time she was 25, Hannah had stopped telling herself it wasn't real. She had researched, dug through old newspaper archives, and what she found chilled her to the bone. The disappearances stretched back decades, always in the spring, always after the rain, and in a handful of cases buried in interviews or obituaries, there were vague mentions of a man in a raincoat. A witness who saw him standing by a bus stop where a woman vanished. A child who spoke of a quiet man outside their house the night their father disappeared. And then she found the photograph. It was a grainy black and white image taken outside a diner in 1953. A group of men SAT at a picnic table, their faces frozen mid-laughter, but in the background, barely visible through the reflection in the glass. There he was. Same coat, same hat, The rain blurred his features, but his stance was unmistakable. He had been there for decades, maybe longer, and no one had noticed. Hannah's obsession grew. She avoided going out during storms, keeping her curtains drawn tight. But one night, curiosity won over fear. She left her window uncovered, waiting. When the rain started, she told herself it wouldn't happen, that this year would be different. But as the clock crept toward midnight, her heart stopped. He was there, closer this time, standing at the end of her driveway. She forced herself to watch, to study him. The rain slid down his coat in thick rivulets, but the water never seemed to soak into the fabric. He was too still, too rigid, like a mannequin posed beneath the SDRETLAMP. Then, slowly, he lifted his head. Hannah's stomach lurched, because for the first time in her life, she saw his face. There was nothing there, just darkness, a void where features should be, a yawning emptiness that made her skin crawl. She stumbled backward, heart hammering, as her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from her best friend, Sarah. "Are you awake? I think there's someone outside my window." Hannah's breath came in short, sharp gasps. She looked back outside. The man was gone. The next morning, Sarah was missing. The police searched. The town grieved. But no one had seen anything. No forced entry. No estrule. Just an open window and a damp footprint on the wooden floor. Hannah knew the truth. She had known it for years. But she also knew that no one would believe her. So she left town, moved somewhere dry, where the rain was rare and the shadows shorter. And for a while it worked. Until last night, when the storm rolled in, and outside her apartment window, far below on the empty street, he was waiting. Whatever the truth may be, one thing remains certain. The next time it rains, check your window. Some paths are meant to be walked. Others should never be followed. Deep in the heart of the Black Ridge Mountains, there's a trail that does not appear on any map. A trail that only reveals itself under very specific circumstances. After the first heavy rain of spring, when the fog rolls in thick and low. Those who have seen it claim it winds through the trees like a scar, cutting through untouched wilderness that should not exist. And those who have followed it never returned. It started as a weekend trip. 4 friends, Evan, Lucy, Mateo, and Harper, eager to explore a part of the national park that had only recently reopened after the winter thaw. They were experienced hikers, well-equipped with maps, compasses, and enough supplies to last days if necessary. The first day was uneventful, filled with scenic trails and clear skies. But by the second morning, the weather had turned. Rain fell in sheets overnight, and by dawn, the world was shrouded in mist. That was when they saw it, a new trail winding between the trees where none had been before. The path was strange, too smooth, too precise, as if carved deliberately. The earth was undisturbed, not a single footprint in sight. No signs, no markers, nothing to indicate it was ever meant to exist. Mateo was the first to point out that it didn't match anything on their map. Yet, despite their unease, curiosity won over. And so they stepped off the main path and onto the trail that wasn't there. At first, it seemed normal enough. The trees thickened around them, the air growing damp and heavy with the scent of wet earth. But after an hour, they began to notice the changes. The sounds of the forest had faded. No birds, no rustling leaves, just an eerie, suffocating silence. The deeper they went, the stranger the surroundings became. Trees twisted in impossible shapes, their branches arching unnaturally as if reaching for them. The fog grew denser, moving almost deliberately, as if alive. Then they saw the footprints, not their own, but others, deep impressions in the mud, leading forward. Bare feet, dozens of them, some small, some large, as if people had walked this trail before. Yet no one spoke. A deep, instinctual dread settled over them, urging them to turn back. But the trail no longer led behind them. Where they had come from was now nothing but dense forest. Panic set in. Mateo swore they had only been walking in one direction, yet their footprints were nowhere to be found. Harper, the most level-headed of the group, tried to keep them calm, suggesting they press forward. Maybe the path led somewhere. Maybe it was a shortcut back to the main trails. But the deeper they walked, the more reality itself seemed to unravel. Time became impossible to track. Their watches stopped working. The light never changed, trapped in an eternal state of dim, gray haze. They walked for what felt like hours, yet exhaustion never came. Hunger never gnawed at them, thirst never set in. It was as if they had stepped out of time entirely. Then they saw the cabin, a small, wooden structure, ancient and rotting, yet standing impossibly in the middle of the path. No roads, no trails leading to or from it. A single door, slightly ajar. A single whisper from within. "Come inside." Lucy was the first to move toward it, as if in a trance. The others barely had time to react before she was pushing the door open, stepping into the darkness beyond. She did not scream. She did not struggle. She simply vanished. No sound. No trace. Only the door, swinging gently in the breeze. Evan broke first, bolting into the trees, desperate to escape. The others followed, running without direction, without thought. Only the primal need to get out. Branches tore at their skin, roots curled around their ankles. The fog thickened, the air itself pressing against them. And then, they were back. The main trail stretched before them, the morning sun shining overhead. Birds chirped, the wind rustled through the leaves, and the world was as it should be. Except Lucy was gone. The park rangers searched for weeks. No trace of her was ever found. No trail matching the one they described was ever located. And yet, every year, when the first heavy rain of spring falls, when the fog rolls in thick and low, hikers report seeing a new path winding through the trees. And if you listen closely, just beyond the mist, you might hear a whisper. "Come inside." So the next time you find yourself in the woods and a path appears where none should be, will you follow it? Every year, as the spring equinox approaches, the town of Hollowbrook changes. The air carries a strange stillness, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Families lock their doors. Windows remain shuttered. And on the night of the equinox, someone disappears. No one searches. No one asks questions. By morning, there's no trace of the missing person. Only the heavy scent of damp earth and freshly sprouted flowers in the air. And by the next day, life resumes as if nothing ever happened. A cycle repeated for generations. This year, it was Jonah Carter's turn. He didn't know it, of course. No one ever did. The day before the equinox, Jonah walked through the town square, feeling the weight of the townspeople's stares. Hollowbrook had always been quiet, but this was different. Conversations stopped when he passed. Eyes darted away. Even the town's mayor, a normally jovial man, barely acknowledged him. Something was wrong. That night, he overheard his parents whispering in the kitchen. His mother's voice was unsteady. His father sighed heavily. A single sentence made Jonah's stomach drop. "We can't stop it." Jonah didn't sleep. He watched the clock tick toward midnight. A storm rumbled in the distance, but no rain fell. The wind carried the scent of the woods beyond town, a damp, earthy aroma, rich with something unnatural. Then came the sound, a low, resonant hum. Not quite music, not quite words. Jonah sat up, his breath shallow. The hum grew louder, wrapping around him like a whispering tide. He tried to move, but his limbs felt heavy. Somewhere outside, a door creaked open. Then footsteps. Not just one set, many. A procession of shadowed figures moved down the empty streets, their steps synchronized, their faces obscured beneath wreaths of woven branches. They walked with purpose, their bodies swaying in rhythm with the unearthly hum. Jonah fought against the weight pressing down on him. He strained against the invisible force keeping him still. Then his bedroom door swung open. A figure stood in the doorway, draped in a long, tattered cloak of leaves and moss. Its face, asterisk if it had one, asterisk was hidden beneath a mask of bark and twisted roots. The scent of earth and decay filled the room. The hum stopped. Jonah's body was suddenly light. He gasped for breath, sitting up as his heart pounded. But he wasn't alone. The cloaked figure reached out. Morning arrived with the first golden rays of sunlight. Jonah was gone. The town square was quiet. No signs of struggle. No search parties. His parents sat on their porch, their faces drawn but resigned. The townspeople gathered at noon, standing in a silent circle around the ancient oak at the heart of Hollowbrok. Its bark bore deep, jagged markings, fresh, as if something had clawed its way out. At the base of the tree, where the roots twisted into the damp soil, lay a single offering. Jonah's favorite jacket, folded neatly. As the mayor stepped forward, the people bowed their heads. A whisper passed through the crowd, barely audible. The sacrifice has been made. And just like that, spring had begun. For centuries, Hollowbrok had flourished. Crops never failed. The rivers never ran dry. Sickness rarely took hold. But the town's prosperity came at a cost. One life every spring. A pact written in soil and stone, bound by something older than memory. And so, year after year, the ritual continued. Until one spring, a stranger arrived. She didn't belong to Hollowbrok. She knew nothing of the ritual, nothing of the whispers in the trees. But when she stepped into the town square, something changed. The wind stilled, the oak's branches trembled, and the roots beneath her feet shifted. Hollowbrok's secret had been kept for centuries. But like all things buried beneath the earth, it was bound to surface. Spring arrives with the bloom of cherry blossoms, their delicate petals painting the world in shades of pink and white. For centuries, they have symbolized renewal, fleeting beauty, and sometimes something far more sinister. In a small town where cherry trees lined the streets like silent sentinels, a legend whispered among the locals. They called it the cherry blossom shadow. Aya had lived in the town her entire life, walking beneath the trees each spring, watching the petals drift like snow. But this year, something was different. One evening, as the golden sunset filtered through the blossoms, she noticed a shadow. It stretched long beneath the branches, unmoving, unnatural. There was no one there to cast it. At first, she dismissed it as a trick of the light. But as she took another step, the shadow shifted. Not like the sway of a branch or the movement of the wind. It was following her. She turned quickly, heart hammering. The park was empty, the cherry trees swaying gently in the spring breeze. But the shadow, it lingered. The next day, she tried to shake the feeling of unease. She told herself it was nothing. But as she walked past the cherry blossoms on her way home, the shadow was there again, waiting. This time, it wasn't just one. More had appeared, silent figures without forms. Aya ran. By the time she reached her house, she dared one final glance over her shoulder. The trees stood still, petals falling in peaceful cascades. And yet, beneath them, the shadows remained, and they were growing closer. The town had always celebrated the cherry blossoms with festivals and lantern-lit nights, but Aya began avoiding the trees altogether. She changed her routes, took longer paths, even stopped walking home after dark. But the shadows, they found her anyway. One night, unable to sleep, she glanced out her window. The cherry tree outside her house stood motionless, its petals trembling in the moonlight. And beneath it, stretching across the pavement, was the same twisted shadow. It was closer than before. Aya slammed her curtains shut, heart pounding. Sleep didn't come that night. And when dawn arrived, she made a decision. She had to find out the truth. She sought out the town's oldest resident, an elderly woman named Yuki, who had lived through more seasons of bloom than anyone else. At first, Yuki refused to speak of the shadows. But as Aya pressed, the old woman's expression darkened. The trees remember, she murmured, and the shadows, they belong to the forgotten. Aya listened in stunned silence as Yuki told her the real history of the cherry blossoms. Decades ago, during a time of war and famine, the town had been forced to make an unthinkable decision. To survive, they had sacrificed their own. Those who were weak, unwanted, or simply in the wrong place at the wrong time were buried beneath the trees. The blossoms had flourished, their roots nourished by tragedy. And every spring, when the trees awoke, so did the ones lost beneath them. Aya's breath caught in her throat. She thought of the shadows, how they had appeared without figures, how they had followed her. She had walked the same paths for years. The trees knew her, and now they had chosen her. That night she stayed inside, but it didn't matter anymore. The cherry blossoms fell like whispers outside her window, covering the streets, the rooftops, the ground like a funeral shroud. And then, a knock at the door. Soft, gentle, like falling petals. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. Another knock, then another, until it became a pounding. Aya's hands trembled as she reached for her phone. But the screen was black. No signal, no power. And then she heard it. A voice. A whisper carried by the wind. "We remember." The lights flickered. The air turned cold. Shadows stretched from beneath the door, curling inward, reaching for her. The cherry blossoms outside began to rot. And in that final moment, as the darkness surrounded her, Aya understood. Spring was not only a time of renewal, it was a time of return. In the days that followed, the town continued its celebrations. People walked beneath the cherry blossoms, laughing, taking photos, admiring the beauty of the season. None of them noticed the new shadow that had appeared beneath the trees. It stood still, motionless, waiting. And if you looked closely enough, you might have seen the shape of a girl, frozen in place, her mouth open in a silent scream. Some blooms are never meant to fade. The first signs of spring arrived in the small town of Black Hollow with the scent of damp earth and the distant sound of melting ice. The townspeople welcomed the change, shedding their heavy coats, embracing the longer days, and preparing for the annual spring festival. But beneath the warming soil, something else was stirring, something that should have stayed buried. The old graveyard on the outskirts of town had been there for centuries, predating even the first settlers. Black Hollow's ancestors were buried there, their tombstones cracked and weathered by time. For most of the year, it was a forgotten relic of the past. But as the winter frost receded, strange things began happening. At first, it was minor. Shifts in the earth, graves that looked slightly sunken, as if something beneath had moved. Then came the whispers, faint voices carried on the thawing winds, murmuring words no one could quite understand. The cemetery caretaker, Mr. Grayson, dismissed it as shifting ice and the imagination of restless townsfolk. That was until he saw the footprints, mud-streaked and too deep to belong to the living. The prints led away from a particularly ancient grave, one without name. The marker had long since eroded, leaving only a jagged stone protruding from the earth. Grayson swore that just days ago, the soil had been frozen solid. But now, a gaping hole remained where a coffin should have been. Whatever had been buried there was gone. By the time the spring festival arrived, the town was buzzing, not with celebration, but with unease. People spoke of figures seen just at the edge of their vision, standing between the trees, watching. The scent of decayed earth clung to the air despite the blooming flowers. And then, the disappearances began. A young woman, Miriam Clark, was the first. She had gone to visit her father's grave one evening and never came home. Her mother found only her scarf caught on the cemetery gate, fluttering in the wind, damp with mud and something darker. Then it was young Timothy O'Rourke, an adventurous boy who had taken a dare to spend a night near the graveyard. The next morning, his friends found his lantern flickering weakly by the entrance. But no sign of Timothy. Panic spread. Some suggested the ground had weakened from the thaw, that the missing had simply fallen into sinkholes. Others, the older generations who had grown up with whispered warnings, knew better. The earth was giving back what it had taken. One night, a storm rolled in, washing the town in cold spring rain. That's when the truth revealed itself. A man, or something resembling one, appeared in the center of town. His clothing was tattered, his skin the color of damp soil, his mouth moving as though trying to speak, but no sound came out. His hollow eyes were locked onto the town square, unblinking, unseeing. Someone recognized him. A woman screamed her grandfather's name, a man who had been buried in that cemetery 60 years ago. The people fled, locking their doors, hiding behind curtains. The streets were left empty, but the figures kept coming. The thawing graveyard had given way to the forgotten dead, and now they were returning home. The town historian uncovered old records the next day, piecing together the terrible truth. A century ago, the townspeople had buried something evil deep beneath the frost-hardened ground. Not just bodies, but secrets. There had been disappearances before, unsolved murders, unmarked graves. Spring had come, and with it, vengeance. They tried to burn the graveyard, to salt the earth, to close whatever door had been opened. But as long as the cycle continued, as long as winter passed and spring returned, so would they. Now, every year as the snow melts and the first buds of spring bloom, the people of Black Hollow brace themselves. The dead do not stay buried in Black Hollow. They rise with the thaw. The festival came as it always did, wrapped in ribbons and flower petals, the scent of spring thick in the air. The people of Black Hollow gathered in the town square, their voices bright with celebration. It was a tradition as old as the town itself, the choosing of the May Queen, a symbol of beauty, renewal, and fortune for the coming year. This year it was Eleanor. She stood at the heart of the crowd, draped in a gown of woven blossoms, her golden hair cascading over her shoulders like threads of sunlight. The townsfolk cheered as the crown of white roses was placed upon her head, a radiant beacon of their devotion. But beneath the soft petals, something far less innocent stirred. Eleanor smiled, serene, composed. But her eyes, they were wrong. They held something deep and ancient, something that watched, that waited. And as the evening wore on, the whispers in the town grew quieter, swallowed by an unspoken unease. The May Queen's feast began as the sun dipped beneath the hills. Eleanor sat at the head of the long wooden table, surrounded by laughter and clinking goblets of honeyed wine. Yet she did not eat. She merely watched. A child reached for her hand, giggling as she offered her a crown of daisies. Eleanor accepted it with a delicate touch, but her fingers were too cold, too smooth, like marble, like something sculpted rather than born. The night stretched on, and one by one, the villagers slipped away into their homes, leaving Eleanor to the elders, who had grown silent as stone. A wind passed through the square, carrying the scent of damp earth, of old roots. Then the procession began. They led her beyond the town's edge, past the fields of budding wheat, into the dense clutch of trees where only the chosen May Queens had ever walked. And in the heart of the forest, where the air grew thick with the weight of something unseen, they stopped before the ancient oak. Its gnarled limbs twisted toward the sky, like the grasping fingers of the forgotten. Eleanor stepped forward without hesitation. She did not tremble. She did not plead. She simply smiled. A voice rose among the elders, low and solemn. It spoke words that had been uttered for generations, words that no one outside that clearing would ever hear. As the chant deepened, the roots of the oak seemed to pulse, shifting beneath the earth, awakening. Eleanor's breath curled in the cool air, mist-like, fading. The flowers in her crown shriveled, their petals blackening, crumbling to dust. And then, as the final words of the incantation left the elder's lips, her skin cracked. Not like flesh, like porcelain. Thin fractures spread along her cheeks, splintering across her hands, her throat. And in the next breath, the fragile shell of her body gave way, revealing what lay beneath. A shape that was not a girl, not human, not something meant to be seen in the light of a festival's glow. The elders did not recoil. They merely bowed their heads, and the forest accepted her. By morning, Eleanor was gone. The crown of white roses lay at the base of the oak, petals pristine, untouched by the wind. The town did not grieve. There was no mourning, no questions, only the quiet acceptance of a tradition older than memory itself. And when the next spring arrived, the people of Black Hollow gathered once more. A new girl was chosen, draped in flowers, crowned with roses. She smiled as Eleanor had. And her eyes, they were wrong. When spring arrived, he woke up. Elliot had always been skeptical of the town's traditions. Every year, the villagers placed wreaths of fresh ivy at the base of the oldest oak, murmuring old prayers for a peaceful season. He laughed at the stories, until the day he stopped laughing. It started with the vines. They grew too fast that year, twisting unnaturally, creeping up houses, slipping through windows. Then came the footprints. Massive impressions in the softened earth, not quite human, not quite animal, leading deep into the woods. And then, people began disappearing. Underscore. One evening, Elliot followed the footprints, his flashlight flickering in the heavy mist. The deeper he walked, the less human the forest became. The trees leaned toward him, their bark almost resembling faces. The ground pulsed beneath his feet, as though the earth itself was breathing. Then, from the darkness, a shape emerged, towering, crowned in leaves and tangled roots, eyes like hollow pits of earth. The green man had awakened. Elliot tried to run, but the roots moved. They curled around his ankles, pulling him down, dragging him toward the earth. As he clawed at the soil, gasping for breath, a voice rumbled through the trees. "You disturbed the cycle." And then, silence. By dawn, Elliot was gone. Only a patch of fresh moss remained where he had stood. Who or what was the Green Man? In folklore, he is a symbol of rebirth, tied to the changing seasons. A force of nature that demands balance. But what if the legends weren't just stories? What if something ancient and powerful still slumbers beneath the forests, waking only when the world forgets to respect it? Imagine wandering into a place where nature is no longer just trees and flowers, but a presence, watching, waiting. Imagine realizing that the very ground beneath you is alive, and if you listen closely, it is whispering your name. Underscore. After Elliot's disappearance, the villagers returned to the old oak, this time bringing more than wreaths. They whispered apologies, buried offerings in the soil, begged for mercy. And as the last villager left the forest, the wind carried a voice through the trees. The cycle continues. Underscore. Darkness hides in the most unexpected places, and sometimes it's watching you. If this story left you questioning what lurks beyond the veil, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a chilling tale from 13 o'clock. Have you ever experienced something unsettling? A shadow where there shouldn't be one? A whisper in the dead of night? Share your story in the comments below, because the unknown is always closer than you think. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and beware the ticking of the clock.